Okay, welcome. Right, we're at our first breakout session of the day here in Alcatraz. It's a great name for a breakout room for me. So, listen, we're going to talk about it's all about the data, stupid. AA 101 with these wonderful gentlemen. I have this incredible small chair, so I'm going to look incredibly small because I'm already small to begin with. So no pictures of that, please. Thank you very much. Listen, we want to get started. What I'd like to do is just run down the line. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and a little bit of background so that we're setting the scene for everybody here in the room today. Thanks.
Morning, my name's, whoa. Hello? All right. Good morning, my name is Samal Mehta. I'm the GM for the customers org at Square. And my org is focused on helping our 2.5 million plus Square sellers get their existing buyers back more often, get new buyers, spending more money. And the way we think about doing that is building tools and services that integrate deeply with the point of sale and take advantage of point of sale and payments data, of which of course Square has a lot of, in order to help sellers kind of automate experiences, personalize experiences, and achieve great ROI.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name's Greg Brockway. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Charish. Charish is a 4-year-old marketplace for furniture, home decor, and art. We've kind of quietly gone from a 2-person startup to the largest vertical marketplace for furniture, home decor, and art. And we think a lot about helping people find exactly what they're looking for, as we have scaled up our marketplace from literally 30 items on the site, most of which came from my wife and my house, to over $150 million of inventory on the site today. It becomes harder and harder to help people navigate that to get exactly what they're looking for. So the notion of the power of big data, personalization, and how that fits with personal style is really interesting and important to solving that problem.
Hey, so I'm Nikhil Raghavan, VP of Product at Etsy for Search and Machine Learning. Can you all hear me? No. Okay.
Can you hear? Could anyone hear me? Okay.
Should I just like speak up?
Just project.
Okay. VP of Product.
Project into the mic, because it is working slightly.
VP of Product at Etsy for Search and Machine Learning. Came to Etsy by way of an acquisition. Someone hear me?
Here.
We'll share this. Thanks, Greg. VP of Product at Etsy for Search and Machine Learning. Came to Etsy by way of an acquisition of a company I founded called Blackbird, which was a deep learning startup. So yeah, we're focused primarily on connecting the 45 million listings on site between buyers and sellers. There's about 1.8 million sellers and 30 million buyers on Etsy. And essentially, it's a fairly difficult challenge that we're solving because most of our products don't just directly bin into SKUs. Everything's unique. And so that's a really interesting challenge where we don't control much of the imagery. Sellers upload that. Same thing with data. So look forward to talking with you all about that.
Hello. Okay, this is not going to work. Hi, I'm Siki. I'm VP of Growth at Postmates. If you haven't heard of Postmates, for customers, what it allows you to do is get anything from anywhere, from a burger to a laptop. If you're a merchant of any kind doing business in the city, we change your addressable market from the 10 meters in front of your storefront to your entire city, all in under an hour. And what the growth team at Postmates does is we do everything from virality to conversion to building infrastructure to help you help us market more efficiently to our customers, acquire users more effectively. And we do that cross-functionally. So it's not just marketers, it's engineers, it's product people, it's designers all working together as one team.
Excellent, thank you all. So, you're thinking about a marketing problem, a sales problem. Somewhere along the line, you have to start getting into how are you going to use artificial intelligence or machine learning or any of the cognitive computing categories to help you get where you need to be. It starts with the data. So where does everybody in here start with the data in order to get going with their project and set themselves up for success?
Yeah, so I can speak to the Square context a little bit, and hopefully that'll be applicable to the folks in the room. One of the things that we thought about pretty early on in terms of customer engagement for our sellers is we deal with obviously millions of small businesses, many of whom have just started their business. And one of the first things that we decided to do is every time a credit card is swiped, dipped, tapped, we will automatically create a customer profile and automatically update the customer profile behind the scenes. And all of a sudden, 2 years later, if the business owner wakes up, they just started their business, a couple years they were busy, they wake up, now they're ready to do CRM, and so they have automated segments available to them, they have automated marketing campaigns available to them, they have automated loyalty programs available to them. So I think the thing that we think about is how early can you start collecting customer data, and how early can you talk about enhancing it, updating it on an ongoing basis, even if you aren't going to use all of it right away, right? So how do you think about kind of depth and breadth of data, and how do you start collecting it in an as automated a fashion and as early as possible?
Yeah, I think with a lot of new technologies, it's really exciting to jump in and start playing around, and you can spend a lot of time, especially as a small company, and a lot of money really quickly. So for us, it's really important to try and figure out exactly what problem you're trying to solve and what you want to do with the technology. So that starts for us with customer insights, so trying to figure out what are the actions that you're trying to get or encourage users to take, and then what are the barriers that maybe are unique to your business, and then from that, what is the right flavor of AI or big data or what have you that you can use to solve those problems. And so just as an example, at Charish, we look for, because we're trying to suss out personal style, we look at what people are favoriting is kind of the single biggest identifier of what someone is looking for, and it allows us to kind of start to key off personalization. There's a lot of other factors that go into the algorithm, but that's kind of one of the main ones. And we found that, if we can get someone to favorite 9 items, they're very, very likely to become a purchaser or already be a purchaser. And so that's just kind of our magic number that we're solving for. And then in our business, one of the other big drivers is shipping costs. It's super expensive to ship a piece of furniture across town, let alone across country. And so it's really important for us to figure out whether we have what someone's looking for kind of in their local market, as well as whether it's just the right item, because that could save literally hundreds of dollars. So again, just kind of starting with what are the key triggers or barriers that you're trying to solve for is a really important place to start, even before you jump into what the technology can do for you.
Yeah, so at Etsy, there's broadly two types of signals we look at. One of those is implicit, the other one is explicit. Implicit is all the usual stuff that you might have heard of, which is clicks, cart ads, and purchases, and all sorts of user engagement with the property. The explicit stuff is something we're really excited about, which is search queries, right? There's the amount of searches we get, it's in the billions. And so being able to make sense of that and then essentially tailor that to what people are really interested in is sort of a huge next step, and sort of where you can get to individual level personalization. We also start collecting data about, is this a gift or not, so that we know if you're buying something cross-category that may not necessarily be something you'd continue to come back to the site for, that isn't something that we should try to personalize on the next time when you come back. And then lastly, to what Greg was saying, locale-specific boosting is something we do when it comes to facilitating commerce between buyers and sellers. So because of the way shipping costs work, if there's a seller in the UK and a buyer in the UK, we're more likely to boost items from the UK sellers and sort of promote them to UK buyers, rather than sort of having all of this cross-border shipping cost that weighs in.
So data at Postmates is absolutely fundamental, and on the growth team, we have a rule. If it is an instrumentation task, it is always P0. There is no instrumentation task that is not important to us. And the reason for that is, for growth itself, for marketing, increasing efficiency, optimizing virality, it is critical that we prioritize well, right? We're always resource constrained. We always don't have too many ideas to do and not enough engineers. And in order to maximize our growth, we have to make sure we're working on the most important thing at any given point in time. And the way we do that is by having really, really good data, understanding the effects of what we build. On the other side, there's fulfillment. So the reliability and the profitability of the platform is backed by data. So everything from if if a customer orders a custom burger from a burger place that's not a partner we've never seen before, how long is that going to take to order, right? And that feeds into what the estimated delivery time is, which courier we give it to. In a lot of cases, if we look at third-party data sources, places might be closed or might have wrong addresses or might not have the right hours. And we have people out in the world going to these places. So making sure that we're tracking all the data and fixing it in real time is also super, super important to the increased efficiency of our platform.
I mean, that's, we're in this mode where we are continuously collecting data on everything, but of course there's a flip side to that, which is the privacy and security issues and the regulatory issues, because especially for you, in the payments business, there's a lot of regulation. What should we be cognizant of? Because as marketers, as stakeholders in this, we want to make sure we're always on the right side of data and not ending up in a situation where we're using this to basically creep people out, because it can get that way very quickly.
Yeah, so again, thank you. That's a very relevant question in the Square context, given kind of the tens of millions of transactions and the billions of dollars of processing volume flowing through the system. We think about this, and we've talked a lot about this internally, about three stakeholders. So we've got buyers, we've got sellers, and we've got Square. And at the end of the day, the Square business does not operate without kind of complete trust from sellers, but also from buyers, even though Square is perceived to be a seller-centric company. So the way we think about it is we've gone out and actually done an extensive audit of all of the data we collect, and we think about what data is seller data, right? And that means that sellers have visibility, sellers have access, and sellers have a right to actually say, hey, I don't want this data, right? I don't want this data around in Square system anymore. So that's seller data. Then you've got kind of Square data, which is, hey, what are the pieces of data that we've enhanced given the fact that we see transaction data all over the US and certainly now more and more all over the world, and there are kind of pieces of data that we actually pull together by collating, right? So names of individuals on credit cards, frequently we will see that the name is available in our data set, but not when the actual transaction happens. Well, is that kind of Square data or is that seller data, right? At some level it's Square data. And then finally, we think about buyer data, right? So if the buyer gave us some preference, for example, the buyer gave us their birthday, or the buyer gave us their email address, PII, we have to provide tools to ensure that buyers can actually get rid of that data, both in a seller-specific context, so I don't want this seller to have my data, or from a Square context, I don't want Square to have any of my data. And then it's an ongoing challenge and an ongoing opportunity to try to live up to those principles at all times. So we've had to do a lot of work kind of codifying the rules internally and then holding ourselves accountable to those rules when it comes to customer data collection. And we keep evolving the principles and we keep evolving as kind of we collect more and more data.
I mean, data for us as a US-focused furniture and home decor business is far less sensitive than the kind of data that you're working with. I think for us it starts with being totally transparent about what we do with the data and trying to be as clear as possible in plain language in our terms of use and our privacy policy. We also don't share data with third parties unless it's for kind of remarketing purposes, so we don't share them with external third parties, so that simplifies it. And then because we're only in the United States, it's a lot easier. There's a huge hidden tax for international expansion when you have to start managing data differently in places like the EU, where it's a very, very difficult, challenging topic. So a lot of small companies get tripped up when they start to think, oh, this is great, I'll go to a different country, and
it's one of the core components of our internationalization, which is we have to go back and look at the regulatory environment.
That gets super sensitive. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not worried about that quite yet.
For the EU specifically, obviously follow everything to the dot with respect to how local laws mandate management of data. But the same logic sort of applies even in the US, specifically with respect to a lot of this data we use for search personalization. It starts with basically trying to create anonymous profiles, so you don't necessarily need to know everything about this person in order to personalize that experience. You can represent them in an anonymous way in order to then go do the personalization, because what you're really interested in is tying some sort of identifier to a set of qualities that they might then be able to be targeted based on.
So you would think as a delivery company, our data is probably not as sensitive financially. But what people do tend to do a lot is use Postmates to order things that you probably normally don't order and go in person to get. And so a lot of that delivery history does end up being a little sensitive. So we have dedicated time and we make sure that that data and personal information doesn't leak to various third-party services we use, whether it's a marketing platform or an analytics platform. But other than that, we really haven't had many major issues, but we make sure that we spend at least a reasonable amount of time thinking about it.
Excellent. So, you've got your data, you've got your plan, you've got your problem that you want to solve, you have your regulations or at least your list of things that you should not be doing. What's the next step? How do you take that forward and how do you start applying algorithms and machine learning and AI practices to that in order to get started?
Yeah, so again, what we think about is kind of the laddering of different data sets and then how you can kind of build different applications on top of that data, right? So the base layer, which I mentioned, is kind of the customer data, right? And that is captured in our CRM tool, which we call Square Directory. That's available to all 2 million plus Square sellers. We're now kind of sitting on kind of 1.3 billion customer profiles, non-unique obviously, because it's primarily in the US, and about just shy of 100 million email addresses and phone numbers, right? For PII, for buyers all over the US. So now we've got this customer data. The next logical step up from an application standpoint is automatically segmenting the data and creating segments using point of sale and payments. So we can tell our sellers, for example, they can come into the CRM tool one fine day and we can tell you, these are your regulars that we derive from the point of sale and payments data. These are your lapsed customers. That, again, we derive from point of sale and payments data. And so we can build these automated segments. So that's step one. Now step two is, well, we've got a marketing product, a marketing automation product, so we can help you run automated set and forget campaigns that target one or more of these segments. So we've got a win-back campaign, very common in e-commerce. We offer that to the smallest of businesses, where if somebody hasn't visited your store in 90 days, you can run a win-back campaign. So that's the next layer up. And on a related note, we'll offer our sellers a digital loyalty program, once again tied to the point of sale. So hey, every credit card transaction is being tracked and kind of collated. So you can create a program that says, once you've spent $500 at my store, I'll give you the next $50 off. Now you're using visit data, which comes from the point of sale. You're using credit card data, of course, from the payment system, and you're creating the customer records in real time, and you're tying it all together to provide a loyalty experience similar to what you might get at Ulta Beauty or Starbucks or what have you. And so we think about kind of ladders. First is the customer data, then the segments, then marketing and loyalty on top of that.
It's remarkably similar for us in terms of the steps. I guess the only thing I would add is we also think a lot about where we want to display the end result of that process. And again, the problem that we're trying to solve is getting someone as quickly as possible to the thing that they're looking for, whether they know what they're looking for exactly or not. And so we think about email. We think of getting compelling product in email dramatically increases open rates and click-throughs. We think about retargeting as a place to display the end product. And then for us, sort order matters a ton, as I'm sure it does for Etsy. A lot of our kind of lessons came out of the travel industry, where if you're buying a hotel or getting a hotel, if you're not on the first or second page, you're almost your purchase rates go down dramatically. And it's the same thing in our business. If we don't get the product that you're looking for on the first or second page, the chance of you kind of bouncing off somewhere. So that's our goal, is to get you what you're looking for very, very quickly. And so that sort order, it's trial and error. So we do a ton of A/B testing, a ton of A/B testing to try and figure out what are the things that really, and it's not always the things that you would expect.
Yeah, so from an Etsy context, everything they said, but I'm just going to spend a minute on...
At scale.
At scale. And I'm going to spend a minute, I guess, on the search aspect of this, which is sort of what's pretty exciting for us. So there's a few different things that we do. So the easiest one is we think history in general is fairly undervalued or underappreciated. So the idea of either promoting recently viewed items, an effective way of doing on-site retargeting versus just off-site, just do the same thing on-site. You'll see a bunch of benefit from that. Beyond that, there's obviously at a search level, we're using deep learning basically to figure out custom image features. Because basically the idea is, can you understand what we call latent variables, which is things like aesthetics in an image, the way someone describes metadata, the sort of price bands or price bounds that you can think of. How do you basically understand what buyers tend to find interesting? Because you can type in something like earrings and find 2 million results on Etsy. The question is, what class of those results make sense for you as a buyer. So part of it is focusing on that, and then part of it is essentially thinking about ways to do recommendation technology, but then again thinking about that from a individualized perspective, which is what's the right set of items to set up in front of you versus being more generic or broad-based.
So I think the first step to operating against a ton of data is figuring out what is good and what is better. What is the KPI you're trying to optimize for? If you look at paid acquisition, you might think, okay, it's your cost of user acquisition. If you're looking at an email message, it might be how many deliveries you want. We settle on one KPI across all of these different channels, and that is when we send a message or we spend $1, what is the incremental LTV lift for that message, right? So from that lens, we see $1 spent on user acquisition the exact same way as $1 spent on a discount for an existing user. If we give a person a $10 discount and that lifted incremental LTV for that segment by $100, that's as good as a new user acquired with an LTV of $100. So that's the first step. In order to operate against that, then you need to start building in predictive LTV models. So because you can't wait 2 years to figure out what happened when you send a marketing message or acquire a user. So based on the first week of data, what do you think, based on past history, that the LTV is going to eventually end up? And then you have to make it better, right? Like across all the different channels. So that's a combination of a cross-functional team, across product, design, engineering, building features, but also platform and vendors. So one of the vendors we use is a vendor called AppBoy. It's a marketing automation platform. And we were able to do things like create, or at least test, a rewards program with a stamp card with zero engineering work, just having marketers say, okay, if you have 5 deliveries in the past 30 days, then you get 5, we'll show you a card with like 5 stamps. If you do 6 deliveries, we'll your card with 6 stamps. And you have 10, we'll give you a discount automatically. So there's a lot of tooling you can build to make it a lot easier to experiment and try to get whatever your KPI is to go down over time.
Excellent, thank you. So, look, it can't all be sweetness and light and roses. There's got to be some big issues. As you A/B split testing, you're going to find that things really don't work, and that's where some of the biggest lessons are learned. So, maybe it'd be fun to just go down the line and find out where some of the biggest mistakes or biggest errors or biggest problems are thrown up and what you learned from that.
Yeah, I think 2 things that I'd say. First is what we realized after talking to kind of tons of small businesses and looking at our product data across our portfolio of products is something that we think is insightful, and we learned the hard way. Our sellers, small businesses, frequently don't have budgets, they don't have time, they don't have marketing expertise. And so, AI, automation, personalization is perfect for them, right? And they need automation in order to remove the drudgery, reduce the guesswork. But what we found is sellers need automation, but they want control, right? And there's an essential tension between these 2 concepts. So for example, if we're running a marketing campaign and if we said, hey, just push a button and you'll get customers and don't worry about the copy, the creative, the header image, the logo, the images that we put inside the email marketing or Facebook ads campaign, just trust us. We tried that. It doesn't work. Because it doesn't matter if it's a larger seller like a Blue Bottle Coffee, a Square customer, or somebody that literally started their business 3 months ago. It doesn't work because at the end of the day, small businesses are hypersensitive, just like large businesses, to things that are core to their brand, right? So I mean, if the logo is square or circular, that matters to them, and they actually really care about that. On the other hand, the things that are going to cause bad guesswork and create bad ROI, we want to automate away, right? So we've thought a lot about kind of 3 categories. One is areas where you provide customization. Things that are core to your brand, provide customization, actually not automation if possible, right? Then the next level up, provide recommendations, defaults. Smart defaults are really valuable. Warnings, right? So hey, we don't think you should do this, but go right ahead, it's your business. And in very rare cases, errors, right? So we think about kind of recommendations, defaults, warnings, errors. So that's the next level up. And then the final level up is actual automation, where we think that this is just pure drudgery and guesswork, and we want to get rid of it. Classic example of that being, again, come back to the kind of 1.3 billion profiles, 90 million email addresses. We see stuff where people will use 2 or 3 credit cards at the same coffee shop, but it's the same human being at the end of the day. So how do we kind of automatically deduplicate customer entities across the entire US-wide Square network? Well, that's an area that is ripe for automation, and at the end of the day, most sellers couldn't care about whether they went through every single suggestion and deduplicated it themselves. They'd rather just have us handle it, right? And so that's how we kind of think about the different layers. Every time we've tried to kind of over-automate in areas that should deserve customization, we've actually been bitten. And so we've actually gone out and corrected our ways over time.
Yeah, your question was mistakes made, and I think A/B testing is so compelling, so easy now with things like Optimizely, so immediate gratification where you get the answer to your test, relatively short order. It's super fun to do, but it's also more, can be more nuanced, and you can make mistakes by solving for a short-term win at the expense of things that maybe don't become obvious for much longer. And so we've made a couple big ones. One that was particularly painful is we get a lot of value out of our email program, so obviously we're always trying to increase email capture rate. And we had a very aggressive email test where we did some things that made it very hard to dismiss our modal and captured a lot more emails, and we thought, oh wow, this is great. And it didn't become apparent that the negative impact of more people bouncing and lower engagement, and frankly those incremental emails were not as valuable as the ones we were getting before. All of those things added up to be a actually significant negative impact on our revenue and conversion 3, 4, 6 months down the road. And so, these things can be subtle, and you just have to, and when you're dealing with real-time LTV models, there's a lot of assumptions.
I hope your next point hits as hard as that just did.
So take that. Yes. I think I made my point. Yeah. Drop the mic.
Yeah, there's a paper that I think I encourage everyone to read. It's written by this group called Qubit, Qubit, and it talks about what kinds of signals that tend to essentially increase conversion. Most UI experiments fail, and this is the fun part of the job, which is running a whole bunch of A/B tests to eventually figure out at the very end which one actually works. But on balance, sort of psychological signals tend to work more often than UI-based tweaks or changes. So, being able to say something like, there's only 2 items left, has a much higher probability of working versus making a UI change, like changing the color of something from green to blue. So a lot of those things, I wish somebody had given us that paper in the past, but now there's a lot more research now based on that, as well as other things we've learned about the kinds of signals that tend to work and the kinds of things that don't work.
I echoed that, and I read that paper, and we ended up doing a bunch of design changes anyway that didn't work. But my favorite kind of surprise is when you add friction and you actually increase conversion. There's a ton of examples in that. And so we had kind of the opposite experience where we don't let you order unless you sign up first and via Facebook and give us your email and take a photo. It's a pretty involved process. So we thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could just browse and check out, and right before you check out, then we ask you to sign up. And to our surprise, not only did the same session conversion go down, of course the week 1 conversion went down even further because we didn't capture the email. As it turns out, people expect some level of commitment if you're going to order something to your house and get it delivered. And by capturing the email, we can then leverage our very aggressive growth marketing platform to get you to convert to the first order. And so, pretty surprising, took us a long time, and pretty much wasted work.
Actually, I'll echo that. The lack of friction we saw in our Square Loyalty product, we added a little bit more friction, specifically email capture or phone number capture for enrollment, and we saw enrollment rates nearly double. Because, and this was a shocking result, because internally everybody at Square talks about automate everything away, reduce friction, and you treat it as a gospel truth. Then you think about it, oh boy, our previous loyalty experience was so automated that people didn't know that they were in a loyalty program, and that does nobody any good. And so you add a little bit more friction, you add an extra screen, it takes a couple more seconds while waiting in line, but your conversion rates actually, your enrollment rates double and your ROI increases by way of adding more friction, which is counterintuitive.
Which is great, because from a data standpoint, that underlines the fact that we should ignore the hippo, which is the highest paid person's opinion, and just focus on the data, which is, after all, what we're trying to achieve here. Take all of that data, structure it, and build algorithms around it that are helping us either predict what's going to happen in the future or that modify themselves in order to give us some kind of competitive advantage. So, just getting a sense of the temperature in the room, who here is currently structuring their data ready for AI or machine learning models? If you put your hands up. Okay, so we have a few people who are working on the data. Who has already implemented any kind of AI, machine learning, or any other predictive algorithms at this point? Okay, so 3 or 4 people there. So, with that in the room, I mean, think about, we've talked about the data structure, we talked about what we should collect, what we shouldn't collect, we've talked about some of the mistakes and the lessons that you've learned from that. So, what's next? Next is apply algorithms to that. How do you fundamentally start doing that? And what's the very first step really to take to make sure you get success in that particular step of the program?
Yeah. So one of the things that we tried to do was actually look at our product engagement data, because that will frequently yield. So we started out completely manual in some cases, and then we looked at our product engagement data, and then we talked to customers, and that will frequently yield interesting opportunities for taking the data that hopefully you've already been collecting for a while, and then layering it in for usage, right? So one of the classic examples that we give is I mentioned Square Loyalty. It's a digital loyalty program that helps sellers run, basically throw away their paper punch card or run a spend-based program, point system, whatever. We saw over and over again that some percentage of sellers, especially newer sellers, were just putting in the wrong information while creating their loyalty program. Classic example being you run a women's hair salon and you have a program like a stamp card program digitally, and you say, 20 visits until you get your first one free. Well, that's going to take 2 years if it's a women's hair salon for 20 visits, and you would think that that's like an obvious thing, but again, deal with small businesses, they're learning this for the first time. What we did was we actually went out and looked at their payments data, and we looked at their transaction history, and now all of a sudden we've got an algorithm that will say, hey, based upon your payments data, your payments history, your transaction volume, businesses like you, around you, your category, we recommend that the right number of visits is 4, right? And it's an arbitrary number. It's not 5, it's not 10, it's not 20, it's 4, because we think that that's going to maximize the probability of getting ROI. And the same is true for minimum spend amounts. The same is true for lots of different things. So I think step 1 for us to answer your question is great defaults, right? We cannot emphasize this enough, especially in an environment like ours with small businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I love that story. I mean, for me, it just highlights how important it is to be asking good questions faster and sooner in the process, because again, you can spend a lot of time and money and engineering resources on things that don't matter. So the way we try and address that is we make sure that it's, the personalization, it's not just an engineering exercise, it's not just a data science exercise, it actually is the responsibility of an engineer, a data scientist, a marketing person, and a product person, and together those people are trying to make sure that they're kind of challenging each other even before it turns into an algorithm change, and taking advantage of all of their different perspectives to start from a better place. Because if you can start from a better place and ask better questions, again, you just get to an even better place faster, and it's all about that speed of change.
Yeah, so a simple thing that we did recently was looking at search data to inform 2 specific things about categorical promotion. So think St. Patrick's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, etc., 4th of July. The 2 things you can tell from search data are when do people start looking for this, which is a reflection of shipping latencies or how they're perceiving when they should start looking for stuff on your site or apps. The second part of it is, given that specific theme, what types of or categories of things are people actually looking to buy? And so you could use that then in customizing the way you do homepage heroes, in the way you market to people, in the way you do offsite stuff. So that's a simple example. So the more sort of involved side of it is actually using deep learning essentially to figure out how do you get the right products in front of the right people out of this list of 45 million items. So right now we're exploring some ideas in sort of deep reinforcement learning, Siamese networks, stuff like that, essentially figure out what the best ways are to get the right listings in front of people.
So, I mean, I will be the first to admit that we actually use AI in very little at Postmates today. There is some machine vision and OCR work involved with we're trying to fix a menu or look at fixing hours, but the first question we ask ourselves is, do we need AI, right? Like, my sense talking to a lot of companies is there's a tremendous amount of low-hanging fruit, just getting better at measurement and process and improving your manual marketing, right? There's a sense that it is kind of a silver bullet that will make things better, but I don't think it'll make things better if you don't fundamentally understand the messaging that resonates with your customers, who they are. And from there, you can go a step up and you can use stochastic methods and you can use the machine learning to, where appropriate, in our case, forecasting and fulfillment. But AI is a very large investment for, in most cases, marginal improvements that you could get without spending a ton of time trying to do that. So that's the first question I would ask, and it's a question that we ask ourselves as a team.
Excellent, thank you very much. And that neatly puts a footnote on our wonderful panel here today. I'd like to thank all of our awesome experts. Please give them a huge round of applause. And we will now be breaking for lunch, and that will take you all the way through to 1 p.m. where you can come and join us on the main stage for the afternoon session. So please enjoy food and caffeine. Thank you very much, everybody.